title. He was honoured at the annual Sport Australia Hall of Fame Awards in Melbourne. And Australian netball vice-captain Renee Ingles will sit out today's second Constellation Cup test in Auckland after injuring her calf in Game 1. Now the 5AA forecast. A mostly sunny day today, heading for 20. Friday sunny and 25. Partly cloudy and 31 for the weekend, and staying cloudy till mid-next week. Temps dropping back to the mid-20s. More news as it happens on 5AA.
Retiring? Life gets better at Balmoral. Visit balmoralretirementvillage.com.au to view the luxury boutique options available. This is Peter Godfrey.
Good morning, right on 5 minutes past 5 now. Temperatures just started to fall back a little bit as we get a bit closer to sunrise, 12 degrees. Right now, let's head across the ditch, take a look at things happening across in New Zealand. Selwyn Manning, editor of eveningreport.nz. Selwyn, how are you this morning?
Yeah, very good, Peter. How are things settling back into your routine?
Oh, yes. I've remembered all the buttons, what they all do over the last couple of days.
The big important thing, isn't it? It always looks like an absolute, like a brain quiz or an IQ test when you look at these radio desks. Temperatures over here, well, it looks like we're kind of heading not too far different to what you guys are doing today. Around about 18 in Auckland. Yeah. As a high, there's rain, kind of forecast a bit of rain overnight. It hasn't rained for a while, but we're in the grip of El Nino. We needed Jane Riley to kind of sift through all the data for us over here, Peter, to,
she'd love to do that.
Good idea of what's coming.
She loves the weather stuff, as you know.
She does,
yeah. Well, let's get on to some news. The first one now, this is sort of following on, we've spoken previously about this, the deportation of Kiwis from Australia that have been charged with offences, but a pretty horrific case that happened here involving incest at a pretty big level. But the woman who's been identified as Betty Colt involved in that is New Zealand born. And John Key's thrown down a bit of a fairly strong statement that, she's lived her life in Australia and she's been the product of the Australian system. So some fighting words.
That's right, Peter. Yeah. He's come out this week staunch on this issue, and we'll go into how it's almost a strange thing. He was very soft with Turnbull on the weekend. Yeah. Malcolm Turnbull. But, Prime Minister John Key, absolutely, Peter, he's challenged the Australian immigration laws. He's saying that the woman who is about to be deported in New Zealand, identified as Betty Colt, that she should stay in Australia. And John Key, he's saying that she's Australia's problem. Now, the woman, as we said, identified as Betty Colt, allegedly a member of the incest community. That has been big case there. News reports in New Zealand have been mapping this too, Peter, with Colt being part of that 40-strong group that lived in squalid conditions in Canberra, is how the reports are describing it. In 2012, just to back, for those, probably just about everyone knows about this case, I imagine, but authorities, they took away 12 children. Testing revealed that only one had parents that were not related. The New Zealand Herald, it reported yesterday that the children who were underfed, hardly went to school, lacked basic skills such as how to shower and clean their teeth, and the children later spoke of suffering sexual abuse, and that's how the New Zealand Herald approached it. Now, John Key, he came out on this one, basically, much more aggressive than he was last week, and he said in the quote here, "I think it is quite a solid argument to say that while she was born in New Zealand, she has lived her life there," meaning Australia, and she has been a product of the Australian system. End of quote. That's John Key, the New Zealand Prime Minister. Now, this outburst, Peter, it came days after, like I was talking about just a couple of minutes ago, after John Key entertained Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull in Auckland. Now, during their first bilateral leaders meeting, Key is believed to have failed to pressure Malcolm Turnbull into addressing this immigration issue, which has been festering for over a month now, where approximately 200 New Zealand citizens currently detained, some at Christmas Island. They're pending the outcome of appeals to their deportation orders. Now, a lot of that, New Zealand has been kind of looking at it There's issues where some of the people that are detained pending deportation, they've spent their lives in Australia since the age of 18 months to 3 years of age. I think there's no qualms about, the individuals being sent back to New Zealand, but that they ought to come back to New Zealand and then pen their appeals rather than be banged up in the detention centres. I think that's the outcome it's heading toward. But 1 month ago, John Key, he issued a very staunch message to Julie Bishop, your foreign minister, while they were attending the United Nations General Assembly meetings in New York. And at that time, John Key said that New Zealand and Australia had this special relationship founded on shared war experiences as Anzacs. He insisted at that time that Kiwis be treated differently to those of other nations in the situation relating to deportation policy. Last weekend, as I was saying, Peter, after a week of pressure building on Key, and it became a hugely politicised last week, Peter, over the side of the ditch. Now, he was pressured to get a result on this that was in favour of Kiwis, to try and actually get some momentum relating to where it's going to track in favour of an outcome.
Yeah.
Now, in that meeting with Malcolm Turnbull, Key was watered down, and he exited there clearly. Just his whole thing was weak and impotent, really. Both politicians, they seem to be focusing more on their friendship. You know, like you said, the bromance is still alive a few weeks ago.
Yes.
And that seemed to be the big thing there. And Key, really, in the eyes of many over here, failed to deliver on where he was positioned. A bit like when Tony Abbott said relating to Putin, I'm going to shirt front the guy.
Yeah.
You know, but nothing really came of it, you know. And
no,
it was
that's right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that issue is still, in some quarters here in New Zealand, it's seething. The opposition parties have seized on this immigration issue and have really said that, the government is failing the interests of these people.
Yeah.
Of course, we've had, an alleged suicide in custody.
That's right, yeah, you mentioned that.
There's some other issues relating to conditions that are being in the focus too. But just on another side, just very quickly, it's not that New Zealand is sweet and honey pie on such things too. With people from the Pacific, New Zealand can treat the individuals in the same way. Only recently we deported a man who had a family here, children raised here from Kiribati, and he claimed refugee status, a climate change refugee status here in New Zealand.
Okay.
And he was deported back to his island nation, and that was highly controversial. But, with the climate change refugee kind of approach, New Zealand just was not keen to try and create a case law precedent on such a thing.
Okay.
The floodgates, if you would like.
Yeah. So similarities to this situation, but differences as well.
Yes, differences as well. We don't have, the Pacific solution where we put people offshore into detention centres, et cetera.
So this quote that you gave, that Key gave the other day about that this woman Betty Colt protect the Australian system, a fairly strong statement. Has that garnered any support for him in making that statement? Has that turned the perception of him, or is he still seen as a bit weak on this issue?
I think he's trying to salvage a little bit there because his ministers, the Minister of Immigration, a man called Michael Woodhouse, he is talking in the press about this woman, her pending arrival. So if you looked at the point, what John Key is making, is he trying to get an outcome where this woman remains in Australia? It looks highly unlikely. So you peel back, what's the purpose of this communication? And one would imagine it's because he's trying to actually strengthen up the damage that he did by not really speaking to New Zealand's own interests in this issue.
So a bit of
Turnbull was here.
Bit of face saving from Key.
A bit of face saving, but it's a little bit of John Key too. He can run hot and he can run cold. One does get the impression that when there are leaders' meetings, that one of the primary purposes for John Key is to make sure everyone feels okay and enjoys themselves. When Malcolm Turnbull arrived here in New Zealand last Friday, the first thing they did was have dinner with John Key and his wife, Malcolm Turnbull and his wife, which is fine, but it seemed like the conviviality continued through the bilaterals, which were held on the Saturday. No doubt, that it was their first meeting. It was noted, too, that how good it was, really, for the trans-Tasman relationships, Peter, where Malcolm Turnbull made the effort to come to New Zealand first off and so quickly into his leadership role. Whereas Kevin Rudd, for example, it's believed that he never came to New Zealand in a bilateral meeting purpose.
Right.
That he pretty much shunned New Zealand. He was over here as Prime Minister, like in transit to the Pacific Island forums, put questions to him in those kind of capacities myself on different issues. But as far as these leaders' meetings, that wasn't the case. Certainly with John Howard and Helen Clark, they were the regular meetings.
Yeah.
And at times we felt the relationship was quite testy between the two of them. Different kind of politics, etc., etc. And Clark, very much one who saw the Pacific as her patch. But, that said, Malcolm Turnbull's got a lot of support over this side of the ditch, and I think people can see that the men, perhaps in an intellectual debate on this issue, some good gains for both sides could have come from it. But at this stage, New Zealand does feel, I think it's fair to say, most people here feel that they were let down by their leader.
Yeah.
But as I said, Peter, yesterday on the breakfast program on 5AA, his popularity as Prime Minister remains absolute. He's still soaring up there at 40%, and his other two main rivals are at 8% in the polls. So, there you go. This kind of thing might dent his reputation, but it doesn't dent his popularity.
Yeah, indeed. He's got more lives than a cat, almost.
Oh, yes.
So we'll just have a quick break and be right back. We'll have to talk Rugby World Cup, I think, as we're getting down the business end of that. We'll do that in a moment. Selwyn Manning's with us, editor of eveningreport.nz.
Hello. This week only at National Tiles, we've got magnificent timber look floor tiles at up to 30% off. Yes, if you want the effect of a timber floor without the fading, scratching, staining and denting, you can't go past National Tiles' magnificent timber look floor tiles. And this week only, save up to 30% off. So rush into one of National Tiles' 3 great locations at Mile End, Nailsworth and Wingfield, or go to nationaltiles.com.au.
It's pretty straightforward. Tyres that last longer stay safer longer. That's why Cooper's CS5 SUV touring tyres have a deeper tread. Put simply, you get more mileage, more value, more safety. It's the most advanced tyre you'll get. At Cooper Tyres, we know you want a tyre that protects your family and stops when you need it to. Plus, Cooper CS5 SUV touring tyres come with up to a 80,000 kilometre guarantee. Cooper Tyres, guaranteed to last. Call 1300 Cooper now or visit coopertyres.com.au.
What do you get when you cross a world-famous supermarket with one fabulous coastal location? Henley Square Foodland. The state-of-the-art supermarket at Henley Square now makes it even more convenient to shop and get the best for your family. With great service, huge range of groceries, restaurant quality produce that can't be beat, and free undercover car parking for the first 2 hours. Why shop anywhere else? Henley Square Foodland. Check us out at henleysquarefoodland.com.au for more info on our fresh produce and delicious recipe ideas.
If you have your mind set on creating the workplace of the future, you need to talk to someone who thinks like you do. Resource Furniture specialises in designing environments that humanise spaces and connects people. Modern, consultative, inspired. These are the guiding principles which underpin every project we complete at Resource Furniture. Work with us to create a work-wise environment. Explore the commercial gallery at resourcefurniture.com.au.
What's for lunch in retirement? Well, you have a choice of this or this. At Balmoral Village, lunchtime and dinner is one big get-together. And instead of sitting down to whatever you can find in your fridge, you'll sit down to a restaurant quality meal and great company. Life gets better at Balmoral. Balmoral Village. Book today to view the luxury options available. Visit balmoralretirementvillage.com.au.
Right now, when you buy a new Toyota 7FBE counterbalance forklift from Toyota Material Handling, you'll go into the draw to win a new Toyota Yaris. That's a Toyota for work and a Toyota for home. Toyota Material Handling, Australia's #1 for new and used Toyota forklift sales, short or long-term forklift hire, and all forklift servicing. Call 1-800-425-438 now or visit toyotamaterialhandling.com.au. Terms and conditions apply. Competition ends November 30.
Life gets better at Balmoral Retirement Village. So good, your grandkids will want to move in. Visit balmoralretirementvillage.com.au. This is Peter Godfrey.
And we're taking a look across the ditch. Selwyn Manning, editor of eveningreport.nz, with us now. Selwyn, the Southern Hemisphere, very much the domain of rugby at the moment, in the Rugby World Cup.
Absolutely, Peter. This has turned out to be something else, really, when you look at it, isn't it? You know, the four nations that have been squaring off in preparation for the World Cup, meaning Australia, New Zealand, South Africa and Argentina, you know, all through our winters, are the ones that have come through as supreme in this Rugby World Cup in the Northern Hemisphere, and certainly to the surprise of many over here in New Zealand. Many, if you look back over the games, Peter, just the recent ones in the quarterfinals, for example, clearly in New Zealand, you know, there was a lot of angst, if you like, a lot of edginess around the All Blacks versus France game. For obvious reasons, you know, France were in the final in the World Cup last time round, when it was held in Auckland. The final was held in Auckland, that is, and All Blacks only won that World Cup final by 1 point, and it was in a single-figure game, that one. It was very tight, and obviously people were just about passing out with the stress kind of watching it. Now, so then there's that spectre of history, you know, this awful thing that happened to the poor old All Blacks way back in the World Cup in the quarterfinals against France in the past, where France had nobbled them and pushed them out of the tournament. All of this kind of thing. Cardiff, were playing in Cardiff again against France, where that had happened way back, you know, over almost a decade ago. So apparently the psychologists were pulled in to make sure our heads were in the right place. And the All Blacks form, of course, was, you know, under question, because in the pool games they had easy pool compared to the pool that you guys had, the pool of death. And the All Blacks in the pool games looked like they were not playing their strong game. They, you know, didn't show any signs. There were handling issues, all this kind of thing. Back here, in the pundits in New Zealand really stuck in. Looking across the ditch, they were seeing up to the Northern Hemisphere, but Australia, its reputation building by the week. You know, in the pool games, Australia looked formidable and still does, you know, in that way. So New Zealand going into France, when it beat France last weekend, Peter, in the quarterfinals, 62 points to 13.
Yeah, big win.
Big win, and it's almost like the All Blacks were saying, there you go, you know, the skills are here.
Yeah.
Almost the audience being back here in New Zealand. But I can see now that the All Blacks play the Springboks, you know, in the next game. Of course, Argentina, it beat Ireland. Argentina beat Ireland 43 points to 20.
Yep.
Now, Ireland was seen as very strong. South Africa beat Wales, of course, 23-19, and that close game between Australia and Scotland.
Last 1 point in that one. Yeah.
Yes, 35 to 34.
Yeah,
now, that was obviously controversial. You know, with the the penalty judgments in the last minutes of the game going Australia's way. But as the pundits have said here in New Zealand, hey, come on here. You know, some of them have said earlier in the game there was this particular incident where, you know, it favoured Scotland and it didn't look like it was right, and people aren't crying about that. So, you know, these games go this way sometimes. So no one is kind of suggesting that Australia didn't deserve to get through into this semi-final situation. But the big games coming up on the weekend, South Africa versus the All Blacks, that's obviously a big game, and Australia versus Argentina. Now, that's not a write-off there. Argentina, as it's saying, you know, they came through beating Ireland 43 to 20. So Australia, they know Argentina, and Argentina knows Australia. All of our teams been playing all through the winter and, you know, getting to know each other, and Argentina's been getting better by degrees over the last few years. So be an interesting game there. But over this side of the ditch, everything is looking at New Zealand All Blacks versus South Africa. South Africa, it's predicted, will do their characteristic game where they're big men, biggest in the paddock, pushing up like a you know, right up the middle, crunching kind of game. Really almost breaking, you know, the All Blacks down through sheer might. Now, then others here, Peter, are saying, hang on, the South Africans could pull something out of the bag here and have an expansive running game. They have these people here in this team that are capable of doing that head-for-head with New Zealand. So it's going to be a fascinating time. New Zealand, can it beat South Africa? The old foe, Australia, New Zealand and South Africa, all pretty close. And it's going to be a fantastic semi-final weekend, this one.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we can talk all about it next week as heads towards the final a few days after that. So,
yeah, well, hopefully, it's Australia-New Zealand final. That'd be fantastic. Then we can throw a few jokes each other's way and get that rivalry going. And,
absolutely.
How good are those Aussies really when you pull it all back and you'll be able to say, yeah, but that guy in your team there looks a bit old, doesn't he? How long has he been around?
We can do all that, definitely. Let's hope that's how it all turns out. All right, so many thanks for joining us this morning. You have yourself a great week. We'll catch you again on Brekkie tomorrow morning, and we will talk to you this time next week. All the best.
Okay, Peter.
Thanks, Selwyn.
Thank you.
Selwyn Manning, editor of eveningreport.nz, New Zealand's independent interactive debate. Head there and have a look. 25 minutes past 5 now.
Looking for residential aged care for your loved one? The elegantly restored Treeview House at Gawler is now open. Located at the gateway to the Barossa, Treeview House provides 68 places across a range of single and companion rooms and suites, all beautifully appointed with private ensuite. Treeview House delivers the highest standard of dedicated care and personalised service with 24-hour registered nursing care. Call Treeview House today.